mold can be invasive to so many parts of our body. One of the things that mold can do is actually stimulate the mast cells to release histamine. And that's one of the other problems with the hormonal migraines is estrogen can also stimulate the mast cells to release histamine, and histamine can be one of the triggers of migraine. So what is in your environment?
Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Michelson. And today we're joined by Dr. Meg Mill, a functional medicine practitioner, best-selling author, and the host of the A Little Bit Healthier podcast. In her virtual functional medicine practice, Dr. Meg works with patients worldwide to heal the root cause of their health struggles through advanced diagnostic testing and personalized support. Meg is particularly passionate about helping people end headaches and migraines, increase their energy, and restore mental clarity without drugs or overwhelming protocols with her proven EAT method. In today's conversation, we are talking about identifying the causes of headaches and migraines and some of the contributors that are common across the board. Dr. Meg, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. I'm so excited for this conversation because I think it's something that impacts most people, at least in certain phases of life, and definitely a big crossover with autoimmunity. So, but I would love to find out, like, why are we going to be talking about headaches today? Share a little bit of your journey with us.
Yes, yeah. So I come from, I was just telling you more of the conventional side. So I got a doctorate in pharmacy. I did a residency, was a clinical pharmacist, worked in hospitals, and was seeing, people, we were putting them on certain medications, certain protocols. And what I was kind of having two different things happen at the same time. One, I was seeing a lot of people just on a lot of medications, but not feeling better. So, we're just sustaining, we're not actually getting better. And then at the same time, really what led me to this change was that I was having my own personal health issues. So I was, I was a kid that had a lot of antibiotics, had terrible allergies, and then, I'm in my early 20s and I start to get so many GI issues. I couldn't even eat. I was getting anxiety. I had all of these different things that started, I would get headaches sometimes, but that wasn't at that time my main symptom. But we moved around and I would go to different gastroenterologists and they'd say, "You're fine, you look great." And I'm like, "No, I can't eat. Like, there's something wrong." And it wasn't until I found functional medicine that I was really able to get those answers, and it really changed my life. And one of my connections is histamine, which we can get, and this is an issue for people with headaches too, is histamine, that kind of connected a lot of my different symptoms. But we were, really getting to the root causes of these. And so I have a virtual functional medicine practice where I see people all over the world, and I work mostly with women. And when I was starting to see people, people were coming into me, and I saw two patterns happen. One was that so many women were dealing with migraines, that, so many people had headaches and migraines. And then the second pattern, so they're either coming to me for that, or the second pattern I noticed were that people were coming to me for other things. And when I do this very detailed intake questionnaire,
Yep.
and when I'm asking them questions, they're saying, "Oh, I have weekly headaches or I have weekly
Right.
migraines." And it's like not a big deal to them. And it's like, "Oh,
Right.
wait,
They
you don't have to live
normalize
like,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is not necessary." And so we'd work together and they would say like, "My headaches are gone. I can't even believe it. I had these my whole life. My mom has it. My sister had," like, they just think that they're just doomed with
Right.
headaches or migraines, and it would be life changing. And I thought, wow, people need to know this. I mean, we need to spread awareness that this is something. So, I started talking a lot about it, and then I got a lot more people, and we've just made these huge, I mean, it's so impactful because you can make these huge differences in the way people feel and the quality of life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's a difference between what you're used to and what's
Mhm.
optimal. So I love that I find I was giggling because I find the same thing. People are coming in for whatever their driver is, and they have like all these other things that are not okay and don't
Mhm.
need to be, a daily part of life or a monthly part of life, whatever that may look at like. So let's talk a little bit about how the functional medicine approach. I mean, you kind of already gave us I know from personal experience, I suffered from migraines when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, neurologists, meds, all, just none of it really helpful. Um, it's not a problem anymore. As I went after the autoimmunity, all the
Mhm.
things I learned about the drivers of my inflammation magically made my migraines disappear. Uh, but so let's talk a little about the two approaches because I would imagine this is certain symptoms or illnesses. There may be a little bit of an overlap in like Western approach, functional approach, um, and then some are like completely different. And I'm
Mhm.
guessing this is going to be one of the ones that's very different, and you're not
Yes.
just throwing meds at people. So,
Yes,
yeah,
and that's the thing. So the conventional medical approach is to really decrease the pain. So we're saying, okay, you have this, you're a migraine sufferer, or you have constant headaches. So what are we going to do to decrease your pain? And so, while that provides you relief, it really does nothing to establish why you're getting this. So people are, okay, well, I have to, take my medication either all the time or when I'm getting the headaches and I'm just living on that and I have to save my nine because I only get 9 pills a month with my insurance and I have to
right.
make sure I keep them and
I
all of
remember
those
at one
things that
point
yes.
I was on
Hmm.
one that I think each pill was like, I don't even remember, maybe $60 or something,
Hmm.
and one dropped like in
Yeah,
between
you're
the
like,
car
oh
seat and the
no.
console, and it was like,
Yes. What if I get it and I don't have to?
yeah,
So,
the
that's kind
struggle
of
is
the
real,
the approach
but
that
it's symptom management
hmm
then
yeah,
at that, yeah,
symptom it.
yeah,
So what we're doing is we're really flipping that upside down. So we're saying, okay, yes, you have the pain and you can still take that medication if needed when you have the pain. And I don't say stop that right away. Or,
of
we work on
course,
actually really looking at why. So the way I work with people is why are you getting the migraines. And another thing, sort of, about our conventional medical system is we're bucketed into specialties, and we can see why. Because you want that's a heart surgeon to know everything about the heart and learn. That is their specialty. But when we're looking at this, a lot of these things like headaches and migraines are full body issues. You're actually getting the pain in your head, but it's signaled from something going on in your body, and it's not just a head issue. And so we're taking all of these connections and we're saying, okay, what? It's almost like I drew out a web one time, and I'm like all these things and how they connect with each
right.
other, and actually because it was just like in my mind of I visually seeing it, and you're really putting those connections together. And once we unravel, like unspool that web, then we start to see these migraines go away. And so what I often see the pattern is first the severity will go down, and then we start to see the incidence go down. So usually it's like, okay, well, I could still get it, but it's not as bad. I'm not having to reach for that pain medication. I can live through it. And then it's like, oh wow, they're starting to go down. And it's really, yeah, it's really amazing. So we're just taking all of the things which we can get into, and we're looking for the root causes and what we can do in order to bring your body back into balance and decrease that threshold of pain.
Which is, and again, life changing and so empowering because once you get to those root causes, then we get to be in charge of our body and make decisions and know what to expect. So
Mm-hmm.
let's talk a little bit about common root causes. Again, I know we're all bio-individual, and I'm guessing you see a lot of what I see, which is a lot of overlap, and it's never just one thing, not usually just one thing. But I'm sure some things that are a little more common than others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the things that can be complicated when we're talking about headaches is diet, because there's kind of two buckets when it comes to diet in this case. And so we know there are common foods that can trigger headaches. So we want to look at those foods, which we can get into. And then we also have individual food sensitivities, which are our IgG antibodies, which are different for every person. And
Yep.
so we kind of have to look at it this in this two-prong approach. Now, when we're looking at all of these food sensitivities, the thing that can be difficult is some of these foods are healthy foods. So I mentioned histamine foods. So histamines are, things like aged cheese, fermented foods, and those like things even like avocados, bananas, things that are
Bone
you're
broth.
thinking, yeah, yes, that you're thinking, okay, everyone's adding avocados because they're a good healthy fat, but those could be
Yeah.
triggering you. We have tyramine containing foods, which are like cured foods. So we're looking at things, even salicylates can bother some people. That's citrus. We have nitrates, MSG, aspartame, caffeine can help sometimes, but too much caffeine can, be something that triggers you. So we're looking at all of these foods. And then we're also, where it gets confusing is we're also looking at combinations and thresholds. So when you think
Yep.
of migraine, you want to think of think of like blocks stacking on top of each other and what's actually putting you over that threshold. So we're always trying to lower the threshold. And sometimes it's a combination. So it could be, that's why, I'm going to use wine as an example because that's
Hmm.
a big trigger for a lot of people. And so
Sure.
sometimes people could have it say, well, I don't think it's wine because sometimes I get a terrible headache, but other times I can have a glass of wine and I'm fine. Well, are you having that glass of wine when you have maybe also some aged cheese, or at a time when your estrogen's higher, or different, maybe you had more stress or less sleep, or what are all the other circumstances around that actually put you over that threshold? So that's where it can be tricky. We have to actually really become health detectives, and I have things in place for people to do that, but it's really actually just sort of starting to look at, okay, what are my triggers and what are my patterns? And then we can start to really see some significant differences once people can identify them. And you can. I mean, it really becomes enlightening when people start to see like, wow, lemons bothered me and I never thought about that.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
I had a feeling we were going to be so aligned, because especially this audience, once we have autoimmunity, we know we have leaky gut, we know there's food
Mhm.
sensitivities at play, and typically they are those things that are healthy because people are trying, right? I'm eating
Mhm.
lots of leafy greens. I mean, whatever it
Mhm.
is, the healthy food. And I love that you say that your explanation right there reflects my story, and again, other than just reducing inflammation, I could never understand. I had cyclical migraines
Mhm.
as an older adult once my RA symptoms were out of control. I was a decade in, I think, on 10 prescriptions and not doing well. But I had, because when I was younger, I had cluster headaches that were way more, often. Um, but these really would follow my cycle. And I did just what we were just talking about. Like, yeah, it follows my cycle, it's just hormonal migraines, chalk it up to that's just life. They disappeared when I stopped eating corn.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Isn't that something? Yes. Mhm.
And it's because of what you're talking about, that threshold, right?
Mhm.
And no, I didn't know back then anything about estrogen dominance, and I can understand in hindsight what was going on. And honestly, I don't eat corn, so I don't know if I were to eat corn. I don't,
Mhm.
I, I'm
Yeah.
menopausal, so I don't know that if it would trigger or not. I
Mhm.
don't, there's no value for me in even trying.
Yes.
I'm
Why
not going to
not
play
worth
with
it?
it.
Mhm.
That's
And
that
so,
control piece, though,
mhm.
right? That
Yes.
empowerment.
And so
Yeah.
corn for you, so corn is not one of our migraine trigger foods as far
No.
as like those foods, but it would be an individual food sensitivity for you. And that's
Right.
where yeah, that's where it's like, okay, I had someone who was I run a group called Headstrong. So for people, like, we go through this, and one of the women in that group said one time, we do a food sensitivity. And so she was taking pea protein, vegan protein, because
Yeah,
dairy is a common food sensitivity, and people
sure.
are so educated. It's wonderful. But you think, okay, I'm going to avoid dairy, so I'm going to get the vegan, which is a pea protein. Well, we did her food sensitivity test, and peas were her highest food sensitivity. And switching out of that pea protein shake really made such a huge difference for her. It was one of those things of, you would never think, though, that that protein shake that you're actually trying to drink to be healthy, to not
Right.
avoid dairy, which a lot of people say don't eat dairy. And so those things, but that was actually triggering her migraines. And so it's exactly what you're saying. It's really enlightening once you start to figure some of these things out.
It is. It absolutely is. And the because we're about positivity and
Yes.
inspiration.
Yes.
If you think of it as the stacking the blocks and the threshold, right?
Hmm.
It's the same. I don't know what popped into my mind when you were talking about that was toxins, right? Like
Hmm.
we're always gonna be exposed to toxins. There's always gonna be some load depending
Yes.
on, who you are, and it's just reducing it. You don't have to be perfect. It's getting to where it's below your tipping point and it's not driving inflammation. So
Yeah.
I love that if there are several factors that play into the migraine pattern,
Hmm.
maybe you don't have to perfectly hit all of them. I don't know.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's different. I guess that would be, it's different for everyone. So,
Right.
there's just so many different levels. It can't, people say, like, okay, well, what is the formula? And then the formula is unique to, we
Sure.
have systems in place to figure that out. But you
Yeah.
may have, I use a Dutch test for hormones, and
Okay.
I can do a Dutch test for someone. Like you're saying with hormones, we can get some of those pathways figured out. And there's some common pathways, patterns I see hormonally with migraines. We get some of
Sure.
that, and you're like, wow, never, the headaches are
Yeah.
gone. Or we could find a food sensitivity, and there could be those, like, one-off, like it was just that. For a lot of people, though, there's more pieces to that puzzle, and it's really
Right.
putting all of those connecting things together that really start to see that change. So it just depends on your unique situation, and how how many pieces that you need to get really back in place before they go, which is individual.
Sure. Absolutely. And I love that, but I do testing up front with my clients as well, including food sensitivities, because people want results. I used to do testing like later on because you can get improvement with, like you're saying, I can give you a protocol and maybe, most people will get improvement, but
Mhm.
everybody wants improvement. And so that's where
Mhm.
that having that individual data and lifestyle, understanding what people's lifestyle is really
Yes,
important. Yeah.
absolutely.
So speaking of lifestyle, let's talk a little bit about how stress can play into migraines.
Yeah. So I like to call this the chain of pain, because, really because the thing is, when you think about stressors, we think about our life and our to-do list and things like that. And those are stressors. And so we need to work on all of the things that bring our body back into the parasympathetic nervous system. But pain in itself is actually a stressor, because stressors can be biological too. So it can actually become a cycle where your headaches are painful, and because you get the headache because you're stressed, it's painful, it's causing stress on your body. We can increase cortisol. High cortisol can actually release another hormone called prolactin, and prolactin can increase pain sensitivity. So you're getting more pain because you have more cortisol, and it just becomes this sort of cycle of stress and pain. And so we need to do things that bring us out of that cycle. So what can and some of these are things you can do at home. I have a lot of things in place where we do different exercises and different things to really bring our body back into that parasympathetic nervous system, but even starting to do some deep breaths, take a few minutes out of each day and, sit in your chair and do some deep breathing. You can start to see if, meditation is something that works for you. I find personally that when I love meditation, I think it's a wonderful tool, but when people are already very stressed and stressed and distressed, it's hard to jump right into something like that. So it's really finding what resonates with you and what you can do and actually get value of and kind of build upon.
I think that's so important, because yeah, it's and meditation is great. I have a practice. I love it. It was really impactful in my healing journey. But I wasn't always in the place where that would have been effective. I wouldn't have been able to be consistent with it. I had one client who I think hadn't visited the parasympathetic state in so long that when she started a breathing practice, just a really simple breathing practice, she actually got like it would in the beginning, it caused a stress response
Mhm.
in her because it was just I think her body was like, whoa, this is a really odd feeling. But she stayed consistent for, it only took maybe like a few days, but I remember the first
Mhm.
time she did the practice, she was like, oh, I felt so
Yeah.
tense, and, I was like, just keep with it. So
Yeah, you have to teach
I
your
love
body.
that. It's, there's so many different things we can do to incorporate into stress management routines. That I love that you said, it doesn't have to be, it's just like there's not one trigger, there's not one stress management routine that's better than another or technique. So
Yeah,
that's,
absolutely. And
yeah,
you have to build the basically like the muscle memory.
yes,
You have to teach, like you're saying with your client that wasn't able to get back in the parasympathetic nervous system. Well, you have to practice, because if you're just doing this when you feel stressed, you're not going to get the same kind of benefits as if you're practicing on a regular basis where your body can realize, oh, that's how I feel when I'm calm. Oh, that's what I feel. And then you teach it to remember, okay, that's what I feel like when I'm calm. And then you can
right.
get there even when you're stressed. You can use your tools to get back to that place.
Yeah. Such good advice there. I love, and it is. That's why these are called practices, right? Like we
Hmm.
forget, like, oh, all of it is a practice,
Yeah.
so that's what are some of, you mentioned breathing, and if someone's ready for meditation, what are some of your other favorite kind of
Hmm. So
entry
some of
level?
Yeah, I think that really working on this the deep breathing probably is the most entry level. I am actually certified in something called hypno breath work. So we do some breath work while we're doing some hypnosis work too,
Oh,
which is
nice.
it helps to do some reprogramming of neural patterns and things like
Yep.
that. So a lot of people find that very helpful. Vagal nerve exercises, things like that. And there's even devices, you
I
can
was
get
just going to
even
ask
heart
you.
math, you can get
Yeah,
there's like something that's called a pulsetto that's a vagal nerve stimulator. So there's different things that people, even depending on everyone's a little bit different, in what resonates with them, but there are
right.
even devices out there that can help assist you. And there's a lot of apps too that you can follow.
That I'm glad that you gave that. That was what popped in as soon as you said vagal nerve. I was wondering how you felt about some of the stimulators or there's some good technology out there that can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, to get you just visiting that parasympathetic state so that then you can build on it. So I
Yes.
love that. And that's hard to look if you're like in the middle of a migraine,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to sit and meditate. You're,
No.
so I
No, but
love,
the more that you yes, so that's kind of where that practice, the more that you practice, the more control you gain over
right,
that response. And so you have more, you have more power. And so that, yeah, that adds, like we said, the stress can cause the migraine too. It can trigger the migraine. So it's one of one of the triggers. And so it's, yes, working on all of those things together.
yeah, yeah, I know. And we are so trained as a society, not listeners because they know, but
Mhm.
all of us had spent however many decades in the magic pill, the quick
Yeah.
fix, and
Hmm.
we're just, we're complex beings. So we need to hit things from different angles as well. So I've heard you say this before, and I want you to share with listeners how surroundings can contribute to headaches.
Yes. So you want to look at your environment. Now, we even know that certain heavy metals like lead and cadmium, we know that mold can be invasive to so many parts of our body. One of the things that mold can do is actually stimulate the mast cells to release histamine, and that's one of the other problems with the hormonal migraines is estrogen can also stimulate the mast cells to release histamine, and histamine can be one of the triggers of migraine. So, we're looking, but going back to the environment, we're looking at what is in your environment. Are you using endocrine disruptors? Are you getting, I'm sure that your audience knows endocrine disruptors, but
I hope
things that
so.
yes, changing out your products, looking at using glass instead of plastic because of the BPA, looking up all of the using ewg.org. There's an app called Yucca. There's so many, resources now, luckily, that I have a list of actually 25 different apps that I send to people that you can use to check products. And so
Yeah.
we're so lucky that we're getting more aware, and there's just information people can use now. But what are you doing in that environment? So, sometimes we do testing to see, do you have mold exposure? Do you have heavy metal exposure? Do you have chemical exposure? But you can just do things like, switch to organic, decrease endocrine disruptors, get a water filter on your water, get I like to say air filters in the bedrooms because I know it can add up. But if, you
Yeah.
think almost half your day or, half
Right.
your in your bedroom. So if you can think of a place, well, that's the place to start. So put some sort of air purifier to clean the air. I was at a conference and they actually just recently, and they had air purifiers that you wear around your neck, which was an interesting concept. You don't want to necessarily be walking around with your own air purifier, maybe, but at the same time, if you are in an environment like, that's sometimes I work with people that don't have control over all of their environment. So maybe you can do that in your home, be going to work and you can't
Right.
control the environment there. That's like, I was like, that's a really innovative product to be able to put around your neck, and clean your air. So it's helping you
It's
breathe more cleaner.
it's great. And I know a lot of people I work with, and I'm sure a lot of listeners as well are and not necessarily diagnosable chemical sensitive people, but sensitive to fragrances, and which I
Mhm.
actually, like you talked about seeing patterns, it correlates as, toxins being a really big player in a driver in the autoimmunity anyway.
Yes. Hmm.
And so that is always one of my, it's like, well, how are you with fragrance or chemicals? Oh, so, I've had so many people say, oh, it's as I've gotten older, I've gotten more sensitive. And I'm like, well, you've accumulated more toxins. It's
Hmm.
not actually age related. And so I love that idea. I came to functional medicine through biohacking. And so we'll
Hmm.
do some really weird stuff to
Yes.
protect our bodies.
Yes. Hmm.
And I would be one of those people that would be, I wouldn't care. It's a
Yeah.
great conversation
Yeah.
starter, right? You can educate people.
Yeah, it's called Respray is the name of that product. So if someone's
Love it.
interested, yeah, you just, and I tried it on. It's actually very comfortable, and can put that on your, yes, like, because it is, you're thinking, okay, I can control my home. We're never going to eliminate
Right.
toxins from our life. We
No,
just can't. So it's like, what can you do to control your environment? Although you don't have control always over every environment. So that's thinking of, okay, when I'm in this situation, what can I do? When I'm here, what can I do? How can I protect myself? Because we do see toxic exposure, we see heavy metals, we see certain things that are, really accumulating that can be one of the contributors to getting regular migraines and headaches.
I love that you brought that up. I know people are probably like, oh gosh, all roads lead to toxins, but they really are. They're a player in
Hmm.
any kind of issue you're having in your body, I promise. And I
Yeah.
love that you said, I say this, I do toxin panels in my programs,
Mhm.
but I always say, everybody needs to work on toxins, and you don't have to do a toxin panel to do just what you said,
Yes.
create that haven in your home and start
Hmm.
there. So I love
Yes,
that.
absolutely. Yes. And this isn't just something I was thinking as you were talking. So think about this, like this scenario. So a lot of times women start to have more headaches or hormonal migraines or what during perimenopause because you're becoming more estrogen dominant. Progesterone goes down first, so here you have more estrogen dominance. Another thing that happens is your bones start to change, and like some lead is one of the things that can cause migraines. So your bones, as you have bone change, can start to lead is stored in bones. And so sometimes you can have lead exposure as a child that you've been storing in your bones. Your bone composition change, you're releasing lead, you're estrogen dominant. You have all, and so it's like looking at all of these symptom things that start to happen that it's like, oh wow. And like you're saying, okay, now I'm so much, I had this, I was under control, now I'm so much worse. And so
Right.
that's not always the case, but we do see those kind of patterns happen, and you can see why it happens.
Yeah, I love that. And again, that's that time, the traditional medicine will say, well, you're perimenopause.
Yeah.
Like the headaches maybe will go away once you go
Yeah.
through menopause. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, wait,
It could
what?
be years. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want to wait that long.
So you brought it up. I'm guessing you have a little more to say about hormonal migraines for women, and I don't know. At this point now, I'm like suspect, even with hormonal, is it really hormones? I definitely estrogen dominance can be a bear, as
Mhm.
somebody who lived with it for a long time until she found functional medicine. So, but any advice for women out there that have been told like, oh, it's just
Yeah, no,
hormonal,
well, I do. So yes, I definitely do. There is definitely a hormonal component to migraines, especially if you're a woman who's having them, like you're saying, at that same time each month. If you're like,
right?
okay, every month at ovulation, I get a migraine, or every month right before my period or during my period, I get a migraine. Well, that there is pattern to that you want to look into hormones, and we see some different common hormonal patterns. Now, when you think of estrogen, you want to use it and lose it. You want to have enough estrogen that you have it in your body, but then you need to metabolize it. If you're not metabolizing it the right way, then you can have some of these metabolites that are even stronger in your body that are creating these estrogenic effects. So we don't, and this is where it's tricky because if you went in and you told your doctor that, they're going to do a blood draw of estradiol. Well, often I'll see low estradiol. It's not always an estradiol issue.
Estrone,
It
I
could
would
be,
imagine,
yeah, yeah.
is yeah,
It's often the metabolites, and so it has to do with the way you're metabolizing your estrogen. And so we need to look at all of those factors and see in order for you to make sure you're actually clearing your estrogen out of your body. So think of your estrogen like a bathtub. This is an analogy I heard and I liked it. So you have two phases of metabolism in the liver and one in the gut. So you have to make sure, it has to be nicely packaged. It connects to bile and go out. So if you have that drain clogged and you're not going to the bathroom daily, you have high beta glucuronidase, you have issues with your gut health, maybe you're not even excreting the estrogen. Maybe your liver's metabolizing it fine, but it's just getting reabsorbed. So we have to look at that aspect. We have to look at, are you methylating? Or, how are you processing phase two? And then we need to look at, okay, what pathways are it's going down? So we need to really look at all of these things and make sure that you're metabolizing your estrogen, that you're balanced with progesterone. Another, like I've been bringing up histamine because estrogen can actually release histamine from the mast cells. Histamine can be a trigger. Progesterone actually helps promote DAO, diamine oxidase, which helps break down histamine. So there's a lot of intricacies here, and that's where I feel like if sometimes it is worth it to do the test not guess approach when it comes to hormones, because if you're getting the right testing, we can just say, okay, look at this pathway, I can help you move the things the way they need to be
right,
done
yeah.
to get it to metabolize, and it can just make such a huge difference.
And thank you for explaining that because so often, if a woman goes to her PCP, like you said, they're going to do a blood test. They're going to, even if they looked at more than just estradiol, in range doesn't mean in balance. And so they're going to be like, no, you're fine. Estrogen
Yes.
dominance doesn't have to mean you have high estrogen levels. It could be, I joke when it comes to toxins and used to be estrogen too. I'm a collector. I like to
Yeah.
keep everything.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, and sometimes it can be like really simple, right? Like for me,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of dim went a long way. So
Mm-hmm.
I love that approach of like, okay, let's see what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point is you're not stuck. There's this almost training that starts as girls with like, oh, that's just part of being a woman. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
no, you don't have to have migraines related to cycle. It doesn't have to be that way.
Oh,
It's a
absolutely
symptom that
not.
something's out
It
of
is.
balance.
It is. It's a sign. If you have that, you need to think, why am I having this pain? And what can I do to stop it? Because it's your body, it's really your body giving you a message.
Right, right. And there's that question again that you ask and answer, which is why, right? Why?
Hmm. Yes.
I love it. Ah, Meg, what is one step? This is sometimes can feel like a trick question, but one step that listeners can take today to start to improve their health. It could be headache related, it could be not, whatever magic you want to lay on them.
Yeah, I can give an easy one when it actually comes to headaches. So that's a good, that's an easy question. So I would say drink more water. So
Ah,
dehydration is an independent risk factor for migraine. And so we want to make sure we're staying hydrated and we want to make sure we're staying hydrated on a cellular level. So you want to drink your water throughout the day. You don't want to just drink like, okay, you know what, I'm so thirsty, I'm going to chug water. A lot of that could actually pass through you. So we want to just keep you hydrated and kind of have that glass of water or that water bottle. I'm not saying the plastic water bottle, but whatever
the
water
glass
bottle
one.
that you the glass, yes, that you use right beside your desk or with you, and make sure you're sipping water through the day, because that's an easy thing to do that can actually be something that can be affecting your headaches if you're dehydrated.
I love that. And that's the best. I think that's the best advice ever. Like there's so many things to choose from.
Mm-hmm.
But we had this conversation, and kind of giggled about it a lot, but it's so essential and so basic. And, we're talking about headaches and migraines and like you said, it can be like just singular cause, but also so many other things, constipation, fatigue, like pretty much you name it, dehydration could be a factor.
Yes.
And it's often overlooked. And, people are looking for it, what's the popular saying, if you hear hoofbeats, don't think zebra.
Mm-hmm.
But we tend to always be looking for the zebra. And
Yes.
sometimes it's just like, oh my gosh, water, water, water,
Yes.
water,
Water.
clean
Yes.
water out of a glass bottle or glass. Love
Yes,
it.
absolutely.
Ah, before we wrap up, where is the best place for people listening on the go to find you?
Yes, well, I actually have a podcast too called A Little Bit Healthier. So on that podcast, we talk about all sorts of different ways you can be healthier in your life. And then I'm over on Instagram at Dr. Meg Mill. It's just DrMegMill. And my website is megmill.com. So on that website is a way, if I do offer free calls to talk through your health
Nice.
issues. So if you want to connect, and there also is a program that I have going called Headstrong. So it has all of the education around headaches and migraines. So you can head over there, and I have articles on headaches and everything, resources over there too.
Lots of resources.
Yes.
I love it. Oh, Meg, thank you so, so much. You gave us amazing gold today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
For everyone listening, remember you can get the transcripts and show notes by visiting inspiredliving.show. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.